Hello, everyone. Welcome to another chat with Beyond Type 2. I'm Tiara, and I'm the Senior Project Manager of Beyond Type 2. Today, I am joined by a return guest, and I call her friend, and she is an amazing diabetes care and education specialist. Her name is Constance Brown-Riggs. You might have already seen her when we talked about healthy eating and diabetes, and you probably have also seen her around social media under the name Eating Soulfully. Constance is also the author of the new book, Living Well with Diabetes, the 14-day devotional, a faith-based approach to diabetes self-management. So, Constance, congratulations on your new book. Constance,
Thank you.
would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, as Tiara said, I am a registered dietitian nutritionist and certified diabetes care and education specialist. I have a private practice. Actually, it's an online private practice. Most people are virtual these days. I was a little bit ahead of the game and started the virtual practice a year or two before we had to go virtual. And I enjoy what I do. I enjoy talking about diabetes, helping people manage their diabetes, writing about diabetes. And as my daughter says, and grandchildren, all you do is diabetes. So that's, I'm passionate about taking care of people with diabetes and helping them to understand that they can live well with diabetes.
Absolutely. And this is exactly why we love Constance so much, because she represents everything that Beyond Type 2 is doing, which is providing resources for people impacted by type 2 diabetes, because we want everyone with type 2 to know that you can live a really healthy life with it. There are a lot of misconceptions about it, including that you have to give up everything that you love, that that taking medications means that you failed at management, and that you can't live a normal life. But we are here to say none of that is true. You can do all of that, and Constance works with people with diabetes every day to dispel those misconceptions. And today we are here to talk about another topic that gets a little bit under discussed for the type 2 population, and that's hypoglycemia, otherwise known as low blood sugar. Hypoglycemia is it can be pretty dangerous, and we're going to go into why. But today's topic about hypoglycemia is nocturnal hypoglycemia. So, Constance, let's get right into it. Can you tell us what nocturnal hypoglycemia is and how it happens, including like the signs and symptoms and why it occurs at night?
Okay. It's hypoglycemia that occurs at night, and thus the name nocturnal hypoglycemia. And generally, it can happen for a couple of reasons. If you are exercising late in the evening, we know that exercise helps to bring down blood glucose. It also helps to stimulate the uptake in the muscles of glucose and so on. And you can have an effect from that physical activity that lasts for hours. Sometimes some individuals find they go low 6 hours after exercising. So certainly, if you're exercising at night, you are at risk for hypoglycemia during the night. Another problem or risk for nocturnal hypoglycemia is if you are skipping meals, particularly if you skip your evening meal, that is a risk factor. Insulin, if you're taking too much basal insulin, you may be subject to nocturnal hypoglycemia. And also, even if you're eating your evening meal, you're taking pre-meal insulin, and you check your blood glucose before going to bed, it may be in your ideal range. But what can happen is, and sometimes people forget that insulin is still working in the system, and so you may be subject to hypoglycemia, nocturnal hypoglycemia, as a result of that. So those are pretty much, oh, one other reason I almost forgot, alcohol, major.
Mhm.
Alcohol can also cause that nocturnal hypoglycemia, particularly if you're drinking in the evening, which is one of the reasons that, one, we do recommend if you're drinking that you're eating something as well along with that, that you're careful to monitor your blood glucose after you've been drinking, because just as you can have that low as a result of physical activity, You can also have a low as a result of alcohol. And what happens in that case is your liver, which typically helps to detox alcohol from the system, also, which kicks in if we have a low, it will kick in to release extra glucose into the system. But if the liver is busy, because its priority is to detox the alcohol from the system, it's not going to be able to basically, we could say, do two things at once. So as a result, you can end up with nocturnal hypoglycemia.
Wow.
Kind of reminds me of, I'm sorry, a client that I had, and she would have nocturnal hypoglycemia during the week. She never had it on the weekend. And I thought that was so strange.
Yeah.
So after checking, took a while to, play investigator and figure out what was going on. She was drinking during the week. She would have, her little cocktail in the evening. On the weekend, she didn't drink because she was taking care of her grandchildren. So that's why she never had nocturnal hypoglycemia on the weekend. It was only during the week. So.
Wow. Okay. I think I'm gonna have to play investigator too, because I do feel like whenever I've like had like a glass of wine, right before bed, and like especially on the weekend, I do wake up like a little bit lower, or as I notice in my CGM that I have like a little bit of a dip. But those are great points. So if you're, I feel like the probably the alcohol part is probably going to resonate with a lot of people.
Definitely. Definitely.
And why is nocturnal hypoglycemia so dangerous? And are people with type 2 diabetes at a high risk for it?
Okay, what makes it dangerous is your sleep. It happens in your sleep. And unfortunately, for many people, they don't wake up when they're having this episode of hypoglycemia. One of the reasons that they associate with that is that the counter-regulatory hormones are somewhat suppressed in your sleep. So you don't feel, that the symptoms, you don't feel shaky and nervous. Your sleep, you don't really get that sensation. And what makes it dangerous is just that. If you don't wake up when you have this hypoglycemia, if you don't recognize that, your glucose can continue to go down until you're unconscious or maybe have seizures and so on. So that's what makes it very dangerous, nocturnal hypoglycemia. And, even during the day, I mean, hypoglycemia, if it's severe, is dangerous. Yeah. But the fact is there's more of a risk overnight. And this is one of the reasons. Also, if you are on insulin or secretagogue, anything that will stimulate the pancreas to release insulin, or you're adding insulin into the system, you definitely are at risk for hypoglycemia and at risk for nocturnal hypoglycemia, which kind of goes to your question in terms of type 2. I like to think of it not so much in terms of what the diagnosis is for diabetes, but basically, as I just said, what is your treatment? So if you're being treated with insulin, you're at risk for hypoglycemia, regardless of whether it's type 2, type 1, ladder, whatever. If you're on insulin, you're at risk of nocturnal hypoglycemia. If you are taking a secretagogue, oral medication, glyburide, one of those medications, you're also at risk because they stimulate the pancreas to secrete insulin. And if you're on more than one medication to manage your diabetes, more than one hypoglycemic medication, that too can be a risk factor. You can run into problems with hypoglycemia. So it's not so much your diagnosis, that you're diagnosed with type 2. It's more the treatment that puts you at risk of hypoglycemia.
And how do you talk to your type 2 patients about it? Like what kind of questions do they have? How do you tell them to prepare for a possible nighttime low?
Well, typically we just, it comes up in a general conversation of hypoglycemia. And always I start with asking, do you understand hypoglycemia? And if they don't, I let them know. But if they do, then my next question is, do you know your symptoms?
Mm.
Because oftentimes people aren't aware of what a symptom of hypoglycemia is. And of course, we have charts and we have, all kinds of literature that talks about the typical symptoms of hypoglycemia, but not everyone has those typical symptoms. Symptoms are very individual. I had a client and she would explain, she would see psychedelic lights, like blinking lights.
Wow.
When she was going low. And she could almost anticipate how low she was based on how fast the lights were blinking. But that, you don't see that written on any chart in the literature as a symptom of hypoglycemia, but that was her symptom. So, I bring it up. It's general conversation. It's all part of educating someone with diabetes. And if they come in and they're on, as I said, insulin or secretagogue, we're having a conversation about hypoglycemia because they're at risk. And again, that whole conversation covers hypoglycemia, nocturnal hypoglycememia as well.
And,
in an ideal situation, though, I have to say this, it just comes to mind.
Yeah.
Ideally, by the time they come to see me, their doctor should have had that conversation with them. If they're on insulin, they're on a secretagogue, again, the ideal situation, the doctor would have had that discussion with them when he prescribed the medication, because it's a risk factor of that medication.
Do you find that you have patients who come in and see you who haven't had those conversations? Has that been common for you?
9 times out of 10, unfortunately, they come in and they haven't had that conversation with their physician.
Wow.
And so again, as part of my role as diabetes care and education specialist, I have to deal with all aspects of diabetes. And of course, having a conversation about nocturnal hypoglycemia is part of that care that I provide.
Yeah. And as far as trying to recognize those symptoms, because let's say you have a patient who comes in and they say, I don't know what my symptoms are. How do you counsel them to track their symptoms? Do you tell them to set an alarm to wake up in the middle of the night, or how do you go about that?
Well, if it's nocturnal, in which of course our conversation is nocturnal hypoglycemia, that is a good way of determining, whether or not they've actually had an episode. But also, oftentimes they'll wake up clammy, sweaty, drenched at times. They may wake up very irritable. Their partner may tell them, you were thrashing all over the place last night. They may be having nightmares. So those are all symptoms of nocturnal hypoglycemia. So I would, make sure they understand what those symptoms are. And that way they, as well as their partner, roommate, whoever that may be, can also be educated on nocturnal hypoglycemia.
Oh, that's really great. I love the point about educating your partner, so that way they know when to recognize it, because there could be an emergency happening right then and there.
Absolutely. And if you don't tell them, they may just think, oh, she's having a nightmare, and just wake up. You still want to wake the person up. But, you may also just ignore it and say, oh, she's just having a nightmare, poor dear.
But being open, I think with your whoever, your partner, significant other, whomever, and letting them know, hey, if you see me just kind of wilding out in my sleep, just wake me up and help me check my blood sugar.
Absolutely. And then also the partner, the roommate, the friend also needs to be educated on how to treat hypoglycemia. Because if you're, experiencing nocturnal hypoglycemia and you're not really waking up, you're going to need to be treated. You're going to need, glucagon at that point. So they need to be educated, not just on the symptoms, but how to treat it as well, because you won't be able to treat it yourself.
Yeah. And for our audience that's watching, there is the new nasal glucagon, where that can be used in in an emergency, you can just spray it in someone's nose and it starts working while you call like an ambulance or call for help.
I love that. The original, if you will, glucagon was you had to reconstitute it, add the powder in the syringe and the liquid and so on. The needle was intimidating. The whole process was intimidating for most people.
Right.
And, your spouse, your partner, your friends may not want to have anything to do with that. So it was a lot more challenging, with Baqsimi or the, nasal type glucagon makes it a lot easier and less intimidating, and a greater chance that you will get the help that you need in a timely fashion.
Yeah, and also it's very user friendly, and it's also easy to identify because it's in the bright yellow packaging for a reason, because they want you to find it really fast. And as far as like for people who are watching this and they're like, well, this is the first time I've heard about nocturnal hypoglycemia. How would you advise them to have these conversations with their physician? What questions should they be asking?
Well, I would advise them to, kind of start the conversation based on, again, their treatment. So it may be, I'm on insulin. I understand if I'm on insulin, I'm at risk for hypoglycemia. And ideally, the physician will take it from there. Yeah. But, so just asking the doctor, should I have glucagon? What should I do as a result of being at risk for hypoglycemia? Just really, you should be able to have an open, honest conversation, and it shouldn't be difficult from the physician's perspective. Again, I believe once you mention hypoglycemia, he should be able to take it from there and give you all the information that you need. But again, many different physicians. So to kind of have a straightforward conversation before you go, do a little homework and have your questions ready to ask. I'm on insulin. What should I look for in terms of hypoglycemia? What range should I be in? Should I be nervous about hypoglycemia if I'm at 150, or should I be concerned about hypoglycemia if I'm at 70? So make sure you're prepared, have your questions in hand, and also ask your doctor, well, do I need glucagon? Of course, we know the answer. You should have glucagon if you're, on insulin or secretagogue, but you can just, ask the physician, ask him those questions. But again, it just should not be difficult, and you shouldn't be afraid to ask your physician about nocturnal hypoglycemia or anything pertaining to your care. There should be open dialogue. And if not, I always tell my clients and patients, if not, feel free to divorce that doctor and find yourself one that you can speak to, that you relate to, and you can have that open, honest conversation. That's just not enough can be said about that, because it's you, it's your care, it's your body. You're the one living with diabetes. You should be able to have all the tools that you need to manage your diabetes successfully.
Let's talk about treatments with food and how to not overtreat it. Would you mind going into how to not overtreat for hypoglycemia, especially when you're waking up, you're feeling clammy, but you may be feeling really hungry?
Okay, so that's so important. Treatment for hypoglycemia. Basically, it would be what we call the rule of 15 in terms of management. Now, I definitely understand it's a miserable feeling when you're low. And the instinct tells you to just take that container of orange juice and guzzle the whole thing down.
Eat everything.
You don't want to do
That's
that.
what it's saying. Yeah, eat everything.
If you do that, of course, you're going to go from one extreme to the other. Your blood glucose is going to go sky high. So first, I always say, try to relax, treat it using the rule of 15. So that's 15 grams of fast-acting carbohydrate. Glucose is the best thing. Glucose tabs is one of the best things that you can use. You can use hard candy. You'll see that listed sometimes, lifesavers. I really don't recommend that because it takes time to chew. You've got to chew that hard candy. So I don't recommend that. Again, glucose tabs are the best. 4 ounces of orange juice, 4 ounces of regular soda. Those are all good fast-acting types of carbohydrate. And then you wait for 15 minutes. You don't want to take carbohydrate with fat. Okay. Oftentimes, patients will say, yes, well, I had a Snickers bar and I used that. I couldn't wait until I had a low so I could have that Snickers bar. You don't want to take anything with fat because the fat will slow down the release of that glucose. And of course, when you have the low, you want that blood glucose level to come up as quickly as possible.
Right.
So that's it. And then wait 15 minutes. As I said, try to relax, wait the 15 minutes. And then when you recheck, if your glucose level is not 70 or higher, then you want to treat again. Then have another 15 grams of carbohydrate. So it's the rule of 15. And then once your glucose level comes up, if it's time for your meal, then have your meal. If it's not near time for your meal, then you want to have a snack, something with protein as well as carbohydrate. So half a peanut butter sandwich, for an example, that will be good. And have that until time for the meal. But also you want to continue checking, maybe in an hour or two, depending on when it's time for your meal, check to make sure that your blood glucose is continuing to remain within range.
And you did bring up being 70 or higher. Could you go over the ranges of hypoglycemia and then severe hypoglycemia when you need to call for help?
Okay, so we'll say mild hypoglycemia, or as the American Diabetes Association states, it's level 1. So level 1 would be less than 70, or between 70 and 54 would be considered level 1. Less than 54 is level 2. So that's, severe. And then what's really severe is level 3. Level 3, basically, you're rendered unconscious. And so you're unable to help yourself. Yeah. So those are the 3 levels for hypoglycemia. Less than 70 is mild. Less than 54 is you're getting into that severe. And then less than 54, which, around 40 or so, really, you're bordering on unconsciousness. Yes. And according to the standards also, that's when they recommend you be given glucagon. That's when you need to definitely have that conversation. When you're having hypoglycemia in level 1 or level 3, definitely you want to have that conversation with your physician, with your diabetes care team.
Yeah, that's when it gets really scary, and that glucagon it really is a lifesaver, and definitely want to touch on why glucagon instead of like the hard candies or the juice, and would you mind speaking on that a bit?
Well, glucagon is really used to bring your blood glucose up fast. It's going to bring it up faster, and it's actually what your body would do on its own. If it was able, it would trigger counter-regulatory hormones there. It would bring up epinephrine and, glucagon would be secreted. So this is giving yourself that injection, and it's going to work a lot faster. Typically, though, when you need glucagon, you're not able to administer it yourself. So this is why, again, it's very important to educate your family members. If you're in school, teachers need to be educated on that. And of course, the nurse in the school, if there is a nurse available. Yes. If, as I said, if you're rooming with someone, whoever's close around you needs to be educated on glucagon, because you're in that state. You're not likely to be able to, treat yourself. Right. Another important point that comes to mind too, for family members and friends that you're educating, make sure that they know not to give you anything by mouth if you're unconscious, because you can aspirate, you can choke on that.
Yeah.
I had a friend that had that experience,
Mm.
and both her and her husband happened to have diabetes, so she panicked when he had that severe episode, and she was putting jelly in his mouth, and he aspirated on the jelly. So you don't want to make matters worse. So if they're unconscious,
Is he
you
okay?
don't give them anything. Excuse me.
Is he okay?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
he is okay. Yes, yes. It did complicate things a little bit, but he's okay. Yes, he didn't die or anything like that. Yeah, he's okay. But it was just, so interesting what can happen when you
Yeah.
panic. And ideally, we don't want to panic. We want to remember what we should be doing in terms of treatment. So definitely don't give them anything by mouth. If that person is able to respond, let's say sit up and
Mm-hmm.
sit up on their own, and they may be a little groggy, but they can sit up on their own and they can swallow, then it's okay to, give the glucose tabs or whatever. Otherwise, definitely don't want to give them anything by mouth.
Right.
Treat
Right.
it with, the glucagon.
Yes, please talk to your doctor about getting a glucagon prescription, especially if you're on insulin or any other type of secretagogue that releases insulin. Please talk to your doctor about that.
One more point, I
Yeah,
knew it was something else I wanted to add.
yeah,
In terms of kind of, lessening the risk,
hmm,
is to think about before you go to bed,
hmm,
think about what you did that day, what the risk factors, excuse me, for nocturnal hypoglycemia are.
yeah,
So, are you eating late? Did you exercise? Did you skip a meal?
yeah,
All of those things would put you at risk. And what you could do at that point is to make sure you're having a snack before
mm,
you go to bed.
hmm,
And that will help to lessen your chances of having that nocturnal hypoglycemia.
yeah. I just one more question. Do you talk to, or at least, well, I guess when you talk to your patients about this, do you ever hear about them being afraid of going low?
Yes. Oh, so often that happens.
Hmm.
And it's understandable
Yeah,
because again, when as we're talking about nocturnal hypoglycemia, we
yeah,
talk about the dangers of nocturnal. So that, frightens many people. And so, they're running high
yeah.
all the time, much higher than they should be. And so that is really having a conversation with that individual, getting them to understand that by monitoring, closely monitoring, that we can take steps to prevent nocturnal hypoglycemia. If they're able, and they're able to avail themselves of continuing glucose monitoring, CGM,
Mhm.
that's a great way to help to calm someone down, give them more confidence, help them to see exactly what's going on, and
Yeah,
to know that they have that system that's going to alert them if
yeah,
they should go low.
yeah,
So I kind of think of that when it's particularly when it's used in that instance is
mm,
like training wheels,
yeah.
let them know, all right, got your training wheels on. Now let's see, kind of trust me. This is what you're going to have before you
Yeah,
go to bed at night. This is what we're aiming for. And over time, they will begin to feel more confident that if they eat, X grams of carbohydrate and they take so many units of insulin, that they're going to be fine. They're not going to have a low blood glucose.
yes, because
So, and
that
then we can
fear is
take
real.
training wheels off unless they just want to wear them all the time.
Hey, look, I am awful. Like, if you need to wear if you need to have the training wheels all the time, do you? Especially if that's the thing that keeps you safe, because
Absolutely.
that fear of going low at night is so real, and especially
Hmm.
if you don't wear like something like a CGM that could alert you in the middle of the night. It can feel like like you're going to sleep and not only do you go to sleep fearful, it's like you don't rest. You don't get the actual rest that you need because
Absolutely.
you're so worried about going low. And it is easy to, eat a little bit, too much and then go high because you feel more comfortable that way.
Right.
But I like how you said like it's okay to start small and closely monitor to build up that
Hmm.
confidence over time.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's Yeah, the fear of lows at night is real. And thank you for addressing
Mhm.
that. Can you tell people where to get in touch with you?
You can find me online, eatingsoulfully.com. That's the website. And of course, there's a contact page there, so you can reach me via the contact page. Also, I am on Instagram, and I changed my Instagram handle, Tiara. I forgot to
What
tell you. It is now your diabetes nutrition expert.
when did this happen? What?
I did that a while back, maybe a couple of months. I think it's been about a couple of months now.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually changed that when I when I published my new book,
Wow.
and I was thinking, eating soulfully. I love that. Resonates with me, but it really doesn't let people know that I am a diabetes care and
Specialist, yeah.
what is it? Diabetes care and education
Special.
specialist. so so I changed the handle on Instagram, but I'm still eating soulfully on Twitter.
Okay. Well, people,
Yeah.
everyone should go follow you. You post some really great content. I have seen your new handle. I was trying to figure out who it was. I was like, huh. I was like, I don't
Yeah.
remember following this person, but it looks familiar. And and then when I looked at when I saw like the memes that you would post or like the information cards, I was like, this
Yeah.
looks like Constance's like brand, like the pink and the green. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's me. So trying to post more regularly and provide educational content,
yes.
things that can resonate with people with diabetes to help them live well.
Constance, just thank you for joining me today.
Welcome.
Um,
My
every,
pleasure.
everyone who watched this, please check out the links to Constance's social media, her book, her website in the description box. And also you'll find resources on hypoglycemia, and you'll find a written version of this article on our website. Please visit beyondtype2.org for more resources on how to live your best life with type 2 diabetes. And we'll talk to you next time.